Jimmy.
Well, there it is, Joe Way, in all his glory.
There you go, your host. What you speaking on?
What's next in high ed? Gonna do like a little like crystal ball type thing from what I'm seeing across the country.
And what are you seeing across the country? People
I
are
think-
sick of hybrid and just want a regular classroom back.
Yeah, pretty much. That, and then I think immersive experiences are going to be really big. That's kind of what we've been noticing, and then a lot of digital signage. So
It's weird. I've been actually hearing a lot more about digital signage lately, which I kind of out of nowhere. I don't know why is that getting popular?
yeah, it's kind of interesting. I think it's because they don't have everything's back ordered except displays. So people are starting to like have money for other things. At least that's what we've noticed. And then a lot of like emergency notifications are really big. I think you guys were just ahead of the curve at USC, where it was really popular, but now it's kind of finally starting to make its way to everybody else.
It's interesting. Yeah, no, it's weird that I've heard it a lot lately. But like digital signage land was empty at ISE, even though I've been hearing a lot about it. And Kaleo was all saying he's in the back corner all alone. No one come visit him.
Even DSE was like very, not super well attended, kind of interesting.
Yeah, that's what I heard. Well, that's what, yeah, Mike was saying. So Mike, I made Jimmy host. So Jimmy, if you want to make Mike host or make Mike co-host, whatever way, because I know you if you need to share anything.
I just made you host, Mike. So you might need to make me co-host if I need to share. I don't know if I can.
And recording is already in and automatic, and it'll stop when you go out. But all right, I'm going to leave and start the other session.
Okay.
Mike,
I'm honored that you get to be with me.
I purposefully chose yours, Jimmy. I can't leave Jimmy hanging. I've got to take care of my man.
I expected nothing less. I demanded it, If I have to do this presentation, I want you here with me, Mike.
Absolutely. Wouldn't have it any other way.
How are things going on your campus? Staying busy?
Oh yeah, always. Right. So today's a little interesting again because we're in the middle of an ice storm. So I sent all the techs home except for me and one other guy, but the other guy's he's managing the virtual Board of Regents meeting today from our little studio, and then I'm kind of last man standing for classroom pages. So yeah, I mean, in theory, I may have to jump at any moment to because I'm the only guy on campus now who's covering issues.
Did they send anybody else home, or is it just your team that you kind of sent home? Or
I just kind of like a lot of my team live out of town. Not that I'd prefer it that way, but that's just they choose to do that. But to be safe, we like now you better go home and beat this ice. So
yeah. Are students still pretty well? I guess a lot of them probably live nearby.
Yeah. No, I mean they've canceled some evening activities, I noticed. But by and large, like the only conditions by which I've ever seen the university close is when it's like minus 60 wind chills. That's, if it's not like seriously life-threatening, they're not gonna close here. We're Midwesterners. You like suck it up, buttercup. You get to class. Yeah. So
you Midwesterners are wild. When I was in Indiana, I was sitting there in my hotel and there was like a tornado warning. The first time I've ever experienced anything like that. And everybody's like, we're going out to the bars, we're going to go continue on with the night. And I'm like, what do we do? And they're like, well, we just kind of wait. And I'm like, this doesn't feel right.
No, I mean, a good Midwesterner, when the tornado sirens go off, they'll go outside and look for it, right? So
yeah, pull out the chair on the front porch.
Absolutely. There's entertainment value.
Yeah, you're built different than we are. And I got Craig Shibley. What a day.
What's going on?
What a time.
Yeah, ma'am, I'll be right back. I'll step out a minute.
Okay.
I'm here for you.
How about you? Staying busy in your new role there? I guess it's not new anymore, but
Yeah, not new, but definitely busy. I think more people know about us this year, which is good and bad, right? We have like more projects than we can handle. But all is well there, we've seen some really interesting trends and kind of that's what I'll talk about today is kind of trends we're seeing nationwide. And then even in K-12, it's really, really interesting because we cover both K-12 and high ed. Our team does. So
Yep.
it's kind of interesting to see the transition that K-12 has taken where they're like doing no hybrid at all.
Mhm.
But they're, investing heavily in other areas. And so you start to see where money's being spent. And then even like community colleges are drastically different than a lot of these big universities we talk to.
Mhm.
So it's kind of all over the place.
Well, I look forward to hearing what you have.
Yeah.
We'll give folks we'll probably start about 1:32, 1:33. We'll give folks a couple minutes.
Sounds good.
So how's your guitar acquisition syndrome treating you lately?
Thriving and alive and well. I sold one a while back that I was proud to finally sell one. I was like, maybe this will kick off something, and I can get rid of some of these other ones in my closet. It's not worked yet. There's still more in my closet that I'm waiting to get rid of. And they sit in the closet. I moved into this house about a year ago. And when we moved in, we just had boxes of stuff. We never really had a chance to get into stuff. And I find boxes now in random closets, and I'm like, should I just get rid of this? Like, do I even know what's in this box? Because I haven't opened it in a year. I don't know if this is even of value to me.
Yeah, no, seriously, my wife and I have that same conversation all the time, right? It's like, okay, we moved 3 years ago. We haven't needed anything in this box. So do we even want to open it, or should we just like keep it sealed up and just put it out with the trash? So
Yeah. Scott had to close his door to try and keep up with the guitar mission here.
In vain.
In vain. I like Scott's office. From the view, I can't really tell the shape of your office, or how it looks. It looks L-shaped, but I'm not sure how much space we got on either side of it.
No, it's just a very small rectangle. It's just there's the chimney right there.
Oh, okay.
But
like
I see Danny on the call, which I'm really happy about.
what keyboard is that back there?
Thank you for asking. That is a Sequential Circuits Pro 1. So that's my axe.
Fancy.
My band unfortunately decided to end. It wasn't even COVID beforehand, but I was basically the lead guitarist, but with a synth. So that was kind of cool.
That's wicked.
Very cool. Very cool. All right, well, we'll go ahead and get started. Hello, everyone. I'm Mike Peterson. I work at Iowa State University, and I will be the moderator for this session today. Super excited to have my good friend Jimmy Singleton with us today from CDW. And yeah, with that, I'm just going to hand it over. You can introduce yourself and share whatever you want to share.
Sounds good. So there's my screen. My name is Jimmy Singleton. I'm from CDW. I fall under our classroom modernization team, and I'll actually just skip over to this slide here. So what I do at CDW is I'm an AV solution architect. I cover higher education nationwide. So I have conversations with colleges, community colleges, universities, private, public, all of them. And then I help our account managers kind of understand AV so that, obviously CDW sells a lot. You've probably at some point had a CDW box sitting in your closet, or on a shelf somewhere in your workspace, and you probably buy a lot of random different stuff from us: laptops, cables, all that kind of stuff. But my role specifically is to focus on the AV portion of it. And that's pro AV from, actual displays and not just the consumer televisions to control systems to microphones to, all the hybrid learning cameras, everything you could need. Pre-CDW, I served as the manager of learning environments at the University of Southern California. So I spent a lot of time in the shoes of tech managers, and I've climbed in racks and gotten yelled at by faculty and stuff like that. So hopefully I felt your pain a little bit. And then I won some awards while I was there, which was pretty cool too. So what I'm talking about today is kind of what's next in higher ed, and really this is more of like a crystal ballish type presentation, what we've seen, what we're continuing to see, what's the current landscape, how it's kind of changing, and then what we can do to kind of dive further into it. If you have questions during this time, feel free to ask them in the chat. My screen is fully shared screen right now, so I'm sure Mike will interrupt me and let me know if there's a question. But also, if you just want to unmute yourself and talk, I'm glad to talk. I don't think I'm going to take an entire hour for this, so we can kind of dive into certain areas if you want to. So with that, kind of what the current landscape is, what we've noticed is, the remote, hybrid, in-person, is it all three? Is it a little bit of both of two of those things? Is it one of those things? I'm sure everyone had some sort of pandemic response, whether that was the adding the cameras, the microphones, additional displays, everything they wanted to make the room possible that students could attend from anywhere. And then you had to choose whether you were keeping that or whether you wanted to do away with it or whether you wanted to do a little bit of both. Some schools went all in on it, some schools didn't. And I think for a lot of our tech managers in university spaces, or you kind of forget to talk about other schools. So you're like, well, I'm doing hybrid, so I imagine everybody else is doing hybrid. And there's some campuses that are like, absolutely not. We're not touching it at all. We're brick and mortar. We're going back to brick and mortar. We ripped out the cameras. There's no option for online. So there are options outside of just what you think is available. And then active classrooms. This was still kind of pre-pandemic, but post-pandemic, making spaces a little more collaborative, making them movable, doing more than just putting wheels on chairs and calling it active. Hopefully that's kind of made a change and we're moving forward with that. And then regular maintenance and upgrades, kind of what are we seeing in the specific rooms? I put displays taking over in general classrooms. This is kind of an interesting trend we've seen lately across the nation, is that people replacing projectors with displays. They get a little more lifetime out of the display. They get higher brightness, remote management, a lot of kind of just different pros and cons to each of them. And then kind of what are new students expecting when they come into those classrooms? AV over IP is still really huge. I think a lot of people are starting to finally make those transitions and having those conversations with their network teams. AV starting to become more IT starting to get more AV. We're starting to see that kind of cross collaboration a little bit. And then specialized spaces, esports is really huge. Broadcast rooms, technical rooms, trade rooms, maker spaces, printing, all that kind of stuff. There's a chat. AV is IT. You're right, Mike. So yeah, that's kind of the current landscape. I really didn't want to push just hybrid learning this year because I know it's still a thing and it's still going to continue to be a thing. But I'm sure all of you are absolutely tired of talking about how many cameras you can stick in a classroom, as I am tired of having those conversations too. So I want to get into kind of more fun stuff. So we'll hit on this a little bit, talk about kind of what this landscape looks like, right? This may be what your classrooms look like now, where you have displays in the back of the room. You have a camera in the back of the room that's shooting forward at the faculty member. They're zooming out. They have the ability to work with the in-person students or the students online. Students online are on this back screen, so they feel like they're part of the classroom. Students in the class feel like there's other students in the class. It's not just the people actually sitting in the room. Those active classrooms, this is a project we did at Indiana University. They have video walls galore. They actually replaced this projector screen back here with another video wall last year. So whatever budget they have, I want everyone else to have, because this is amazing. But this is a space that, each of these tables is able to work collaboratively with each other. They're able to, share to content to that specific screen, or they can share content to the larger screen if needed, which is really cool. I just had the wind like bust my window and made it crack a little bit. So if my internet goes out, I apologize. Another thing is these active classrooms, kind of the smaller classrooms. This is what we're seeing a lot for general classroom spaces where, they want to make it active. They want to make tables movable. They want chairs to be movable. They want different types of seating. They want, different ways to write on the walls, different technology in the room. I think a lot of us are probably still seeing this kind of normal classroom, and a lot of you probably have, 36 chairs facing forward still. But I think we're starting to see that change a little bit more from 36 chairs facing forward to how can we spread this out and make this room a little more collaborative. And then, like I said, esports is really huge. We have an entire team at CDW dedicated to esports, and they do similar stuff that I do. And then we work with them when it comes to the actual AV that goes in there. So whether it's video walls, projectors, speakers, all that kind of stuff, we'll get involved. But we have an entire team dedicated to the curriculum side of it that's helping, actually develop what an esports program is and how to get more involved. So if you do have questions on that, let me know. Glad to get you in touch with whoever you need to be in touch with. So looking into the future, what's next on this horizon? And really it's what is the focus of the institution, right? I'm sure your upper administration is talking about whether they want to keep hybrid, whether they want to expand an online program. We've seen a lot of schools add online programs that they previously didn't have, where they can find new enrollment, find, ways to get more money into the university outside of just the brick and mortar classrooms, or being able to add enrollment to larger classrooms, right? If you have an auditorium with 400 seats in it, what difference does it make if that class can be done online with 1,500 people? Is the student experience actually too much different? Yes, Greg says yes. Yeah, so it's a little bit of both, right? A lot of people are wanting to do, everything, and maybe they haven't seen what other institutions are doing. Maybe they're not entirely sure what they want to do, but they know they have CARES funding or some sort of funding available, and they want to make sure that they get as much as they can for it. So really what I try to ask a lot of people is like, what can we do to pivot and find ways to drive that more enrollment, more interest in your campus, right? Some community colleges are really based off of how many students they have in a classroom. They can't count their hybrid students as part of their enrollment. So then they don't get as much state funding when it comes because it's based on in-person classrooms. So they don't want to focus on hybrid because they need more people in classes. So how can we drive more people to come on site in that kind of space, whether it's a technical school or a trade school? How can we get people to be interested in wanting to go there and make it kind of more fun to be on campus and learning more fun? This is actually a thing that Craig mentioned one day when I was at dinner with him. And I found it really interesting, and I think more people should take this approach. But we always have people who look for the local university next to them or their biggest competition, USC and Notre Dame, want to fight over who's got better classrooms because there is a competitive nature to it. And I think that's great, but not just competing with other schools, right? The goal of being at a university or any sort of education is to prepare people for their careers. So how can we put you in touch with, if you have a nursing program, can we put you in touch with a local hospital to see what they're using so that we can help integrate that in your learning environment instead? So we want to kind of drive those connections. Another great thing about what CDW is that we cover all of those kind of different categories of corporate, healthcare, education. So we can make those connections a lot of time and help get you in touch with the people that you want to be in touch with, so that you can learn from them. And then I think we're going to have a huge focus on student and employee experience. Like I said, finding different ways to get students to actually come on campus and enjoy being there. So this is kind of that view of the classroom, right? This is a room packed full of everything, right? And this is maybe a little more K-12-ish, but different styles of seating, right? If you're standing, you're more likely to be collaborative than you are if you're sitting, where you're more likely to be receptive. So we want to find ways to, put furniture in rooms that make sense for what the classroom is being used for, different types of seating that they can, put people in pods and let them work alone in a corner, or, put them all together and let them work in a larger group. How can we add, hybrid modality to it without doing the full install? Maybe we don't need ceiling microphones and all that. Maybe we can just roll a card into the room. Wireless casting is really big. Making sure the room is collaborative, making sure people can share from wherever they are and having to kind of get rid of cables as a whole. One question I always got when I was at USC was that faculty would walk in and they'd be like, I just want to open my laptop. I want to start my class. I want to be done. I don't want to have to plug anything in. I don't want to have to start anything. And I was like, I want that too, so that you would stop calling me every time you start your class. And what we get is the ability to do that with wireless casting. Still have a couple steps there. We're not completely there, right, where you can just walk in, open your laptop and be done. But we're getting a little bit closer to that each time. And I think as manufacturers start to develop more, we'll start to get a little closer to that end goal of just walking in, being done. So this year, looking forward into the future, I think we're going to see a huge uptick in immersive experiences. Like I said, we want to make it exciting, make learning fun. We want people to actually want to come to campus and dive in a little bit more. And I think immersive experiences are kind of our slow path to doing that. I know we had that conversation this morning in the main room about K-12 and possibly involving them in HETMA and stuff like that. And the chat's really funny because you get, what does K-12 know? K-12 is doing some really cool stuff. You kind of have both sides of the spectrum of like, I've seen my kid's school and it's nowhere close to where it needs to be, which is a good point. But there are some K-12s that are doing a really good job, right? And that new generation of students coming out of K-12, depending on what they had there, maybe expecting either the same or more once they get to high ed. So it is weird to kind of get a step from K-12 when maybe they were using Promethean interactive flat panels and they were getting really involved in the classroom. And then they get to college and it's, a 78-year-old professor with a piece of chalk and a blackboard. And they write really small across the entire blackboard across the front of the room. And I'm sure a lot of you experience that. But how can we learn from K-12? How can we start to make some of those adjustments so that students coming in aren't taking a step back in how they learn? And hopefully we can put more of that technology in. I think we're going to put the students at the center of that experience. They're the ones who really drive, the choices being made. And I think we've always done that similar as tech managers. When I was in a tech manager role, I'd go to Infocom or whatever. I'd see a piece of technology and I'd be like, that's really cool. I want that. And then I'd put it in and then someone would try it and students would not like it. Faculty would not like it. And I'd be like, why don't you like it? I love this. And it's because they're not technical people, right? Maybe it's just not built for them. Maybe there's a different approach we can take to it. And then lastly, school's expensive. I got my degree. I did it online and it was still expensive. And I would wish that every penny I paid was worth a lot more. So if we're forcing students to go on campus, if we're trying to drive more students to be on campus and go in person and pay this money, how can we make it worth every single penny that they're getting? How can we make the experiences really good and then also prep them for their careers and make sure that they're ready for it? Awesome. That's a good point, Mike. So admission tickets to each class A school, what would you do differently?
It was really interesting. He his big thing was about experiential, just what you were, talking about here, right? And he said, basically what you're same point you made, right? Like students are paying for this, right? And so, if you had a ticket booth out front, like a movie theater or, a performing arts theater, what would you do differently, to make sure that, people felt like they were getting, their money's worth out of that or whatever. So.
Yeah, that's a really good point. And I think about this too with like, you look at like artist meet and greets and stuff like that with bands and stuff, which I always think is really interesting, right? Where you can pay more to go shake someone's hand or, sit there and listen. But you would think, if that artist said, give me $20 in person, they have to actually take the money from someone, and then and then give them whatever it is, either a handshake or something like that. How much different would it be if it wasn't just part of a process, right? If students actually walked up to a professor and said, here's my, $10,000 for this semester, that's a crazy amount of money each time. And it would be really interesting to see how obviously faculty aren't getting all of that money. It's not directly on them, but it's on the university as a whole, right? It's an experience that everyone's a part of. Whether you're IT staff, and I know it's hard sometimes because you're in a different building, or if you're in AV, you're probably in the basement somewhere, and you're not getting to be a part of that experience all the time, but realizing that your job does have, a large functional role in how students enjoy their education. So, like I mentioned with K-12, this is a project we did at an elementary school in their main lobby. And so this is them walking into a classroom or them walking into a lobby area. I'm sure a lot of our schools that, I've been to a lot of colleges and universities, and I've seen some that look nothing close to this, right? They don't even have a TV in the lobby. So I've seen some that are just brick buildings that look like prisons. So how can we make it a little more exciting to come into a space? How can we drive a little more engagement? This is something I think we can learn really well from K-12, especially in some of these more common areas, but they're using this to avoid field trips a lot of the time, right? If we're worried about saving money on sending students elsewhere, trying to get them out of the neighborhood, if there's more concerns about that, how can we bring a field trip to them? How can we put them in an environment that's an aquarium, or, they're in space? Like it seems, nominal because they're children and you're trying to think of ways to do this with adults, but there's more ways for us to drive interaction in a classroom, in a common space, anything that kind of gets people more excited to be there. I went to Disneyland this week, twice, actually. I went Monday and Tuesday, so this is fresh in my mind. But I was thinking about the Disneyland experience and kind of everything that falls into it, right? The moment you get there, the moment, and this is probably for any theme park, Disney just does a really good job of it. They're very focused on the customer experience. So the moment you get to the parking structure, you're surrounded by Disney characters, you're surrounded by themes, you have things to do. There's a clear path of where you need to go. Everyone's walking the same direction. Then the moment you step into the park, you hear music, you have all these kind of it's almost sensory overload, right? You can look in so many different directions. You have so many choose your own paths that you can say, I want to do that, or I don't want to do that. I know exactly what I want to do. I know where I want to go. There's a reason people pay obscene amounts of money to go to Disneyland for these experiences. So at night now, they've changed their end of night castle experience that used to just be fireworks and some lights. And now they projection map the entire castle and all of Main Street. So this is not the colors of those buildings, but they projection map all over them and make them look like whatever they want. They can play movies on them. They can change, they can put you in a completely different environment than you are just being on Main Street. It's not just the same anymore. So thinking about this, how can we apply that a little bit more to our classrooms, or even just, specialized spaces where we can put an immersive technology? Another kind of example, I just took some screenshots from emails I got this week, but mixing lights with projectors, right? This is an ability to walk into a room and be immersed in a different environment, completely separate from, walking into school. You're not walking into a square classroom with bricks on the wall, where someone's going to talk at you for an hour and a half. You're walking into an experience you're able to touch, you're able to feel, you're able to move around. And I know some of you might be thinking, well, I don't have the budget of Disney, and I don't have the budget of wherever this thing is, and I don't know how possible it is in high ed. It's possible in high ed. Someone has done it, right? So people have been able to actually accomplish this and do it for more, do it for less. We kind of have some different options. But Kent State did this makerspace, which is really cool. So this allows them to do AR, VR, XR. They also have this projection that goes all the way around the room, so they can immerse them. It doesn't have to be, like this previous slide, You don't have to buy a dome and project every, every single inch of it, but you can create something similar that allows students to kind of come in and be the master of their own destiny, right? They can choose their path. They can have different content to work off of. Different schools can go in there and work on different things. It's just a lot more flexible. So some more pictures of that same space, different ideas, right? We can surround them with options for QR codes, which I think is really interesting. This can almost become like a museum type space too. If you have an art school, maybe an art gallery that you can show off students' work, that you can get people to come in and drive attendance to. It's a great way to host events. This is a great way to bring more money into your institution, get more people involved. You can rent this space out to other people and get more income so that you can focus that income more on projects that you want to accomplish. These are all great things to mention to your upper administration when you're trying to sell the idea of, I want this room with, 4 projection walls on it. Another shot of it, different environment. I don't know what's being projected on this. I don't know what this image is, but I'm sure someone does, right? It seems important to someone. And I think, they add, like I said, they add VR, they add ways to get students in here and actually put on headsets and get immersed in this experience completely, and allow other students to look in on it. Even medical programs, this could be really popular for, right? If you can kind of take a deeper dive into some of those subjects that you're learning about. VR, AR, XR, all of that kind of stuff, really cool too. Becoming a huge trend, especially in education. We've gotten the like hologram question a lot. As we talk to people, they're like, we want to beam someone in from another country or another state to come talk to our students, and we want them all to wear, headsets, and they can see and talk to that person, which is possible. Comes at a price, and it comes at a willingness to, support it. Obviously, I don't want all of you to support all of those things because that's a lot of work. But how can we start to make those things easier? Technology is getting better. It's getting a little more streamlined. This is where I think VR and stuff is really good for kind of those smaller spaces. But then when you have these larger spaces, right, where you can actually drive everybody in there without each person having to put a headset on and get involved with something specifically to them is really cool. So how do we do it? Like I said, focus on the details and the experience. This is similar to that Disneyland approach, right? How can we take the Disneyland approach and apply it to the classroom? How can we, make sure that every person from the moment they walk by, or the moment that they become a user, or the moment that they're supporting that environment, that everyone's experience is equally good or better than the last? How can we get the details just right? We can do a wall of surrounding projectors, but if we have a hole in that wall and it looks dumb, then it's not gonna be a good detail, right? We want to try and not focus on those bad things, but how can we do it on a budget, as well as be realistic with it? Lean on our manufacturer, integrator, reseller partners. Like I said, I'm lucky to work at a company where we have teams for just about everything, which is really cool. And it's great for our customers too, because we can kind of put them in the right category and say, hey, here's who you need to talk to. But integrators are doing this, right? Manufacturers have the equipment that's being put in these spaces, whether it's VR, all that kind of stuff. They're willing to send demo units. They're willing to give these things a try so that you can see how they work in an education space. And similar to like HETMA approved program, a lot of people don't know, what's good for higher education. They're unaware of that. So they need your opinion to kind of say, here's what we need to tweak, here's what we need to change as a manufacturer so that this is a good fit in education as a whole. And then selling the value. Like I said, students drive pretty much every project that happens on university campuses, right? So the moment students start to complain is normally when funding starts to get allocated for certain things and things start to get better. How can you, as the tech manager, either do pilot programs or any sort of thing to kind of drive the value of this? I came from a university where we had to do this, but now that I work in a more corporate environment, they want a business case for everything, right? Every time you want something, it's, give me a presentation of exactly why I want this, what's the value of it, how much is it going to make us, all that kind of stuff. And it's all the stuff that nobody wants to do. But we have to do it, right? So how can we take, even if it's a small room, you have a room that's available to you, how can you pack technology in there? How can you get students to come into that space and start to drive kind of those selling points, right? What's the return on investment? How many students is it going to drive to this space? What's it going to change about the student experience? How are we going to make learning more fun, better, prepare them for careers? A lot of questions to ask yourself, but lean on your partners to help find those questions, right? Like I said, I talk to institutions nationwide all day long. These are the conversations we're having. This is what we're trying to help them sell to their upper administration so that they can pursue this further. And then the what about budget? We always get this. I don't have money for this. No one has money. There's money doesn't exist. It's just there. And it doesn't appear until we start to figure out how to sell the idea of it, right? Digital signage is similar in this way where, digital signage is there's never budget for it until you say, well, what if we could do emergency notifications to the entire campus at a moment's notice? And then suddenly they're like, well, that's public safety money, then we have some more money. We can start to pull on that. So how can we find ways to sell immersive experiences, overall better experiences? So can we, prove that value? Like I said, the business cases are huge. How can we compare to other institutions, but also career paths? VR and all that is really starting to become more dominant in engineering type in spaces too, whether it's car manufacturers, all that kind of stuff. Let's find an example. Let's say, hey, at Volkswagen, they're hiring people who understand X, Y, and Z. And then we take that back to our administration and the institution and say, hey, here's what Volkswagen's hiring for. How can we make sure that our students are on the best career path the moment they leave this school to pursue that path? And then how can we create it at a lower cost? That's an option. We can get into interactive experiences that are, not an entire room covered in projectors, which is cool. But how can we start to make things a little more high touch, a little more visual? Digital signage is a great way, interactive wayfinding, interactive displays in the classroom, collaborative technologies, wireless casting, all that kind of stuff. How do we get students to be a little more high touch in a non-touch environment to get them a little more adjusted? And then can we pull budget from other projects? I don't necessarily want to throw anybody under the bus, but lead times are what they are, right? You have to spend money at some point. You have things that are on your project list. Obviously, there's things that need to be done. There's things that you have to wait for. So if you're waiting a year for something, whether it's switches or a piece of something larger, how can we maybe pull budget from that to focus on something else like this in the meantime, right? Whether it's an immersive experience, a lot of this stuff is in stock, if it's projectors, if it's displays, how can we start putting those things in, but maybe we hold off on the pieces that we can't do? Can we pull from those other projects? Can we try and share some budget here and there? Digital signage, like I mentioned, this is kind of a good way to do immersive experiences without immersing a room, without trying to do an entire thing. But a great way to also sell it to other stakeholders that maybe you're talking to is campus events and info, right? This could just be a blank wall if you wanted it to, or it could be a poster that someone hangs every month and they pay, X amount of dollars for a gigantic poster every month, and then they ask you why this sign's going to cost you so much. And you say you're going to spend that on posters anyway. So something like this, we can accomplish with a projector, we can accomplish with a direct view LED. We can do two completely different price points for something like that. But it makes walking into this space a little more exciting, right? Digital signage is like 78% more likely to grab someone's attention, to make more likely to make them remember something. Campus wayfinding, a way to actually see around your campus, see around buildings, give people a little more high touch experience, right? Not have to ask somebody where a classroom is, but actually go up to a screen and say, I want to go to X classroom and I need to find it, and they can do that. Emergency notifications, like I said, this is the way to get money. If you're trying to get money for digital signage or for any of these things, if you say public safety can use it and send an emergency notification to everybody at the same exact time, this is a great way to start there. Athletics, obviously, this is kind of that immersive experience, right? This is placing you in a crowd with hundreds and hundreds of other people. But then also, how do we make it more visible for everybody? How do we maybe make some adjustments to this that we can, we can run advertisements on, we can run event notifications on. And then lastly is the campus advertisements. I think a lot of people overlook this as a way to make money as well. Obviously, we have to be careful if we're state funded, profit, not profit, all that kind of stuff. There's a lot of, red tape to get over. But there are ways for universities, institutions to make money, or even just internally transfer money, or just do it for free internally if that's your interest, right? How do you advertise across campus to all of these different people? What do you want to advertise? What are you trying to sell to people? And then, like I said, interactive flat panels. This is really the last part of this. Huge part of the classroom experience. If we don't have necessarily the budget to do a classroom or a room that we can immerse people in, how do we just make something a little more collaborative? How do we get people to actually touch something? How do we get them to, work with each other on a shared space, or, be able to share different content up to it, write on it, make adjustments to it. Interactive flat panels are kind of taking that trend a little bit further. Like I said, people are starting to replace displays with projectors a lot of times, or projectors with displays. A lot of times those displays are interactive displays, especially in K-12. You have students coming out of high school who have used this in their entire education, K through 12, and now are coming into college and expecting something a little bit more. So with that, any questions? I finished. Pretty good timing. I'm early. Any questions, comments, things you guys want to talk about?
Nice presentation, Jimmy. Yeah, and by all means, this is should be a very interactive thing. Feel free and turn your cameras on and unmute your mics and have a conversation with our CDW rep.
Jimmy, are you seeing any fundamental differences in what K-12 is doing versus what higher ed is doing? Obviously, higher ed is going to have more specialized things, but from a general classroom standpoint, are you seeing any fundamental differences? Are they kind of looking at doing the same thing? What are your thoughts on that?
I think they're looking to do something similar. I'd say the main difference is the hybrid versus non-hybrid, right? I think K-12 has made a pretty clear line in the sand that they are not doing hybrid, or want to offer online. They don't care about the capture that much. They really only want it if they have to do it. And that's, we want the ability to do it. We're going to leave the camera in that we put in 2 years ago, but we're not going to look at really upgrading it or advancing it. We did have one school in Wisconsin that did actual studios, instructional studios, which was probably the most high ed move of most of the K-12 people that I've seen. But they did, I think, like 8 of them that were actually built for recording. They record specific content. So they have like a STEM program that does their stuff in those rooms. And they use it to give students more information outside of the classroom. If they want to watch videos, stuff like that, kind of like the crash course model. But otherwise, I would say the actual like advancement of classrooms, K-12 is kind of ahead of it a little bit, depending on the university, the institution. But I think institutions have consistently been like 30 seats, face the front of the room, look at a presentation, look at a whiteboard, and then K-12 is starting to get like well, we want every chair to move. We want students to be able to work in a group. We want 6 displays around the room that each student can plug into, which is where I see some specific rooms in high ed going, but I think high ed's going to start to transition more of that in their general classrooms to change it from just receptive all the time. Because like I said, I think high ed sees that value in online courses. If you're going to just talk at someone for an hour, why not do it online? Why do you have to go into a classroom and sit in an auditorium with a bunch of people? I hope that answered it.
That's great. Thank you.
Jimmy, I have a question. My name is Danny. I'm at Northwestern University. I work at the Kellogg School, and curious to know, we do everything IP based, our latest building, and it's all SMPTE and kind of more broadcast side, the whole entire building, as opposed to your traditional kind of AV over IP, locked into a specific manufacturer way that they kind of encode, compress, do all their different methodologies to get that signal down the line, right? And so, like, for instance, we have at our facility here, everything's 10 gig, and it's all 1080, 60 uncompressed signals. I'm curious to know if you're seeing in the industry the whole kind of SMPTE 2110, IPMX, AES 67, do you see that actually as becoming viable, especially, for example, right? So in higher ed, usually, at least this is how it is at Northwestern, I think it's often at other schools, central IT owns the network, right? And they're the ones that decide how you can put stuff on the network and that. When we set up the Kellogg Global Hub, we actually built an everts infrastructure, tied it into the university's network, but all that 10 gig signal that was getting sent was all within our everts monolithic architecture for the building. Now we're looking at, okay, how do we do all of our other facilities that we have classrooms, 50 other classrooms in? Kellogg's a lot smaller than like Central, where they have hundreds of classrooms. And so, as we're looking, and we're talking to different people, they're discussing how difficult they're having with these signals pointing at, like, hey, why am I getting these artifacts, or why am I hearing pops in the sound? And like central IT is saying, hey, it's not the network. The people that are part of the different schools are like, well, I don't know what the problem is. Maybe instead of having it all on the university's network, maybe we're going to go back to just throw down switches per room and then just connect in to the room. For me, that is totally unacceptable from the way that we do things now. And so I'm curious to know what you're seeing in the industry, especially in higher ed, where we have to like share IT spaces with central IT and stuff.
Yeah, so I think we kind of like force this conversation a lot. And when I was at USC, we had to have the conversation with the networking team, but we were all Crestron NBX, we weren't like an open standard or anything like that. But the conversation was, can we put 1 gig on each port and send multicast all the time? And the answer was, are you insane? So I think it's a tough one to have. We had a conversation about IPMX just last week internally about kind of if that would cannibalize, even like Dante AV and stuff like that. And then you have Extron's NAV and Crestron's NVX and stuff like that. Are they all going to be willing to share and, start to make those transitions? I think, Mike, you might have something. I think are you all NAV at your campus, or how's your AV over IP?
Yeah, so we have 2 buildings that are fully NAV throughout. Our Student Innovation Center is pretty much, you can send anything anywhere. But there's even there though, there's a Dante backend, for the bulk of the audio is actually all still being distributed over Dante. And then our new Stark Performance Center, and that's athletics, so they have infinite amount of money, but that's where the new football locker room is, and which is spectacular, giant floor to ceiling direct view LED displays and whatnot right in the locker room. But that whole building's fully nav, and we did it. Each building was done a little differently. For the Student Innovation Center, we're just right on top of the regular network. One port on a network switch could be a nav. The next port could just be someone's computer at their desk, and we have a VLAN that separates off our stuff. But otherwise, as far as bandwidth capacity goes, we're right there on the regular switch backbone. So, and we have had really no issues at all with that. For the performance center, we did, pretty much separate out the nav AV over IP traffic to a separate switch bank. But even then, there's a connection from that to the campus network. So, yeah.
Yeah, I would say that's kind of what we notice a lot is like everyone's got an AV LAN. That should be kind of the first step to getting onto your main network. Is they can limit you, but not keep you entirely localized to your building, right? You don't have to create your own network to work off of. But a lot of it's just, I think, a tough conversation with your networking team, depending on what relationship you have with them. Of whether or not you can do it. We oftentimes will pull in, I know AV over IP, and I can talk that language a little bit, so I'm okay with that, but I'm not the full-blown networking guy. So we'll pull in someone from our networking practice at CDW and say, hey, can you help us have this conversation so that we don't just look like we're trying to throw AV on the network and it's unsecure and it's going to take up all your bandwidth, how can we appropriately approach that?
The good thing is, at Northwestern, we have a great relationship with Central IT, right? They're geniuses. I mean, I can't say enough good things about them. And when we built the global hub, we built it as a large venue architecture. The integration and everything, we carved out an virtual routing and forwarding architecture. So we got a 10.26 class B network for 5 different sites that one site's down in Miami, 2 are in Chicago, 3 are in Evanston, right? And so they're all tied together. And then within each of those sites, they have like 5 or 6 different VLANs so that we can carve out the Dante audio from the control and blah, 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 right? So we all of that, I think is solid. What I'm interested is, it's interesting. I sit in, and I was in a meeting not too long ago over at Shure, right? And all the experts from all the different universities were talking about their network audio experiences, right? And there was a similar theme, right? There was this kind of like trust level of like some of them are like, hey, you can't even put that on the network. They won't even let you. It's got to be air blocked. Others are like, you know what? The network's not robust enough. We're getting pops, all these other things, right? And so what I was just curious to know is like the whole nice thing about the whole kind of like SMPTE and IPMX and AES 67 and the whole COTS where you could put things on the switch and stuff like that. Sorry, hang on, let me just that whole argument is that standardization allows a level of orchestration. Like what amazes me, there's all the proliferation of these edge devices, right? That have all these multicast addresses. And so like, I'll just take our building here. We have close to 1,200 devices in just the global hub. And those 1,200 devices are all static IP. And off of those 1,200 devices, we probably have close to 10,000 multicast addresses, right? And so we're actually using an orchestrator, like basically a software-defined video network that understands all these devices, the sources and destinations, and it keeps track of all the multicast addresses. What amazes me is some of these other solutions, AV over IP solutions, they don't really have an orchestrator that keeps track of all the multicast addresses. And I'm just curious to know, like, Jimmy from CDW side, like you guys are amazing on the networking stuff, right? You got a whole, because I know that Northwestern uses you guys to deploy all of our networking stuff and that, right? So do you see this, is anybody seeing this as an issue in higher ed? Are they trying to think about it differently? Or is it just like, you know what, Crestron's the 800-pound gorilla in the room, and so I'm gonna just go with them, and oh no, I can't buy Crestron anymore, so the next thing that's out there is, you know, Pure AV with Extron, right? Or whatever else that's out there. I'm just kind of curious to know how people are thinking about this.
I think that's the exact thought. I don't think it's any different than that, right? I think it's, you know, we're Crestron everything, right? You're a Crestron or an Extron house. You choose one of the Trons and go on your way. But we have a lot of people who are like tied into VC4 and Fusion, right? And that's what they're using to track all of their endpoints and all of their IP addresses. But I think we probably take a little more of a networking approach at CDW at least. And I'm not sure what's available on the networking side of keeping track of all of their endpoints, but I don't know if anybody's really doing it right as of yet. I don't know if anybody's got like an overall standard. I think that's where like IPMX, that conversation starts to come in. And I think that's where we're going to start to see that open standard become something that everybody gets on, rather than trying to, you know, each have their own individual thing, and, you know, make people track in 10 different applications of where their stuff is and what IP addresses are there. Unless anybody else here has had wonderful experience of keeping track of all of their information that's not on a smart sheet somewhere.
No, I mean, I think yeah, the smart sheet is your friend, right? For a lot of that stuff. Yeah, it's interesting. You know, I will say, when our first foray into AV over IP was that Student Innovation Center, you know, and our team reports through the IT reporting structure. So, you know, we report through the CIO. And so we have a good working relationship with the networking team. So, you know, we're starting to toy with it. So I was sending brochures off to the network team and you know, and say, hey, you know, any concerns with this? And I was silence, right? You know, and we got a little closer and we really wanted to do this in this building, you know, and so I was, you know, pushing a little harder, you know, silence. So then finally I called a meeting, right? It's like, okay, I'm gonna get everybody in the room and we're gonna talk about it. And their response was kind of amazing to me. It's like, yeah, Mike, we looked at it. We don't really have any concerns. Our network is robust enough to handle this. So not sure what you're all worried about. I guess we'll put you on a VLAN if you really want to, but we don't think we really need to. They had zero concerns about making this happen on our campus network. And this was not the experience that I was expecting at all, you know, and it could be that, you know, I've got a one-off network team here, but I think increasingly you're going to find more and more network teams where they're like, yeah, okay, it's not really a problem, right? So, you know, as far as the standards go, I'm really excited about the potential of IPMX, you know, and what Ames is doing. Do I see Crestron, Extron, you know, Biamp moving rapidly to adopt it? No, there's no vested interest for them to do so until somebody forces the issue. And how that's going to happen is you're going to get 3 or 4 mid majors. You know, you're going to get a Kramer well, there's 2 or 3 of them that I thought in my head. I'm like, what you can do is you're going to get 2 or 3 of these, you know, up and comers or players who want to play with the big dogs but aren't quite there yet, and they're going to get together and decide they're going to make interoperable components, and everyone's going to start buying their stuff because they like the concept of interoperability. Extron and Crestron's going to lose business. I mean, that's how it's going to happen, right? And you're basically going to have to force the hand, and I think it'll be the small manufacturers that do that. So
Yeah, I'd be even curious, you know, like Scott, maybe you can touch on this a little bit. But you know, like the MXA mics have a Dante network card in them, right? And they have a port for it. And whether or not Dante wants to play IPMX, or if they want to keep it completely separate, right? At what point does Sure say, yeah, we can do both, or we can do one or the other, and whether or not that's good or bad for business, until someone forces their hand.
So, I mean, I don't want to speak for Scott. I mean, Sure's been ahead of the game on everyone using AES 67. So, you can go either or, Dante or AES 67, and take advantage of that. So I think, it's interesting. There's some big players that are out there. I mean, Matrox, they're not a small player. They're big in MX. Panasonic, if you talk to Daryl on the Pro AV side, they have a whole slew of products that are on the SMPTE 2110 and the IPMX realm. Then you got to go into the broadcast area where the cost increases, right? So, like, for example, what we did at the Global Hub, we did everts, right? That's a premium price that we paid to put in gig systems. So I get it, right? Totally understand where you're coming from, Mike. It's and it's interesting because talk to integrators, much like yourself, Jimmy, not just integrators, but designers, consultants, right? And everyone keeps, saying AV over IP, and but I think I will say this: the system that we deployed for the Global Hub, I think we built that fiber system back. We started architecting it, actually doing product development for everts, and we started designing that in 2014, and we deployed it in 2015, and it's been a rock. And we're doing 1080 60 uncompressed everywhere into our broadcast studio and all the buildings, and Dante tied into the university's network. And so I think there's definitely a place for this, and the universities, I think, could definitely use the benefit of it, because I don't know how it is at Iowa State. Mike, by the way, my nephew goes to Iowa State, so awesome for the Cyclones. And so anyway, at Northwestern, it's just very distributed. Each department has its own kind of department and how they want to do things. They can all do it totally different than the next person. And so it makes it really hard for central IT to be like, how do I give a coherent set of services across all the different locations? And I do think when you start architecting something that, the COTS switches are all kind of standardized, and you just roll it out to all the different departments. And granted, you got to have the product to be able to support those standards. I do think that there's value in it. So that's why I was just curious to know, Jimmy, if you'd seen this coming down your way or not. So
yeah, I think too. No, I think that's good conversation. I think too, coming back to the use case of AV over IP, is everyone talks about it, right? I want AV over IP, but what are they really using it for? And just because it has a cat cable doesn't mean that it's AV over IP, right? It has to touch IP. That's the part of it that makes it different. And even NVX and NAV and stuff like that is we can send signal anywhere, anytime, all the time. And how often are you really using that? Are you ever logging in and changing? I want classroom 230 to go to building A50. You're never actually doing it. Most of the time it's localized, you're worried about the classroom. But I think you start to get into points where, depending on how you run, you kind of run more broadcast style of point to point, but via the internet, right? Without using a video conferencing platform, right? How can I do it with less latency, maybe a higher video quality, stuff like that. And we've seen people doing that for years, since early 2000s. People have been doing IPTV and doing lecture capture that way. It's not new. It's just a matter of everybody adopting it.
Yep, absolutely. Cool, nice job.
Yeah, thank you. Any other questions, comments?
I'm gonna ask around about IPMX. I don't.
Yeah, I'd be curious what Sure's kind of take is on it. If you're already using AES 67, then I'd imagine no issue. For a lot of it, but I think it's new to the game. Understanding what people will do with it.
Jimmy, quick, I know we're about up on our hour, but you were talking about some higher ed classrooms were favoring displays instead of projectors. Is that a certain size classroom? Are you seeing bigger classrooms do that with multiple displays? What's kind of the layout you're seeing with that?
So normally the price jump is at the 98-inch mark, right? So you can get an 86-inch for like $4,000. And then you go 98-inch and it suddenly becomes like $8,000 to $10,000. So really smaller rooms that can handle like an 86-inch and below, we can say we can get you the same price as a projector, but for an 86-inch screen. But if that room's too big for an 86-inch, then it's probably not the right method for us. A lot of times it's the interactive flat panels, right? They'll throw an interactive flat panel at the front of the room. That could be 55, 65, 75, 86, whatever size. And then they'll pair that with a projector or with multiple displays. And then also direct view LED. There's been a lot more people to come out with like the 136-inch all-in-one direct view. That's kind of been taking the place of projector screens a lot.
Now, I don't know about other institutions, but we are still very whiteboard heavy.
Yeah.
And, the interactive displays don't have that same kind of real estate, or at least for the price that whiteboards do. Are you seeing whiteboards just generally be removed in rooms that are favoring displays?
Yeah, if they're doing interactive displays, they'll if they're doing normal displays, it's either a classroom that they don't care about whiteboards in. So probably not your math and science people. But if they are replacing a whiteboard, they'll do interactive. And then you do technically have unlimited real estate, right? With interactive, which is nice. But you only have so much real estate at a time on an 86-inch panel that you have to move, and then you lose that. But there's a lot of applications and stuff where students can log in, have a view of that entire whiteboard. They can save it so that they don't have to worry about losing that information that's on the whiteboard if faculty moves too fast through something and they just want to be able to catch up on it later.
Great, thank you.
Good. Well, I think that's our time, unless there's any final questions. We can all hop back into the main room.
Right.
Cool. Nice job, Jimmy.
Right on.
Thanks,
Thank y'all.
Jimmy.
Thank you.
See you guys back there.
All right. See you. Seeing if Dustin was going to drop.